Paris Agreement, renounce our rights. And I'm very, very sure we did not do that when we were in Paris. So I would say that. And that would be my comments for the reservation. Finally, I would just say that this does not end the work. You know, I mean, I've worked on for 30 years here, and on the Paris Agreement, 7 years, because it started with when Senator Alvarez was still the vice chair in the Copenhagen negotiations. The Paris Agreement, sir, is a direct result of the Copenhagen failure. And we came here, you know, it was a very, very hard work, but we realized the work is not yet done. For the Senate, we welcome the ratification. We urge you to ratify quickly. But this is not the end of your work. I think there has to be a legislative agenda. And I'm glad that the chair of the Environment Committee, Senator Villar, is here, because there has to be a legislative agenda that accompanies this, both for environment and for energy. For environment, because forests are a major issue, marine coastal resources are a major issue as we move forward in implementing the Paris Agreement. Energy is obviously a major issue, and there has to be a legislative agenda if we want to achieve our commitments under the Paris Agreement. I'm glad, actually, Madam Chair, that the President had you know, recognizing that you are both the finance chair of the Senate and chair of the climate change, special committee on climate change, Senate, have also recognized, you know, I mean, as an unofficially the, you know, the chair of the Climate Change Commission, or to oversee the executive, in your oversight capacity, of course, not an executive official, but to oversee all the different agencies. The fact is that we have so many agencies that really have to be involved in climate change. The Climate Change Commission was created to coordinate that effort and to lead that effort, but the truth is, to move it forward, to really get us to implement it properly, you need you know, both a carrot and a stick. You need both leadership as well as persuasion to do that, and I'm very glad, Senator Legarda, that you have also been recognized by the President as being able to do that. So that's all, Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean Lavinia. I'm glad that you mentioned that. Let me just concur with you regarding all the submissions. And let us just clarify that what was signed on April 22nd, 2016 was the treaty. That was the Paris Agreement. What was signed by the President is the same treaty. And all the certificates of concurrence and the accompanying annexes and declarations would not make part of the treaty, but they are governmental affairs that will be noted and that will be recognized and that will be taken into serious consideration, but will not form part of my defense on the floor of the concurrence to the ratification, just so that everybody is on the same page, because perhaps not everyone in all agencies of government would really understand the process of ratification, and so this is the education of everybody. The statement that the Paris Agreement shall in no way constitute, as Dean Tony said, a renunciation of rights under any local or international laws or treaties is actually, in the words of Dean Tony, superfluous, because it is a well-recognized legal doctrine that the Constitution as a supreme law of the land may not be contravened by a law enacted by Congress, including a treaty. And as a treaty, the Paris Agreement, once approved by the Senate, becomes part of the law of the land and would be on the same class as a law or statute. So again, we recognize and appreciate the declaration of the agencies of government. However, as our lawyers here have stated as well, it was quite unnecessary because the Constitution states, and I read Article 2, Section 7, the state shall pursue an independent foreign policy and its relations with other states. The paramount consideration shall be national sovereignty, territorial integrity, national interest, and the right to self-determination. And I have a long remarks here. Allow me to just put this memo on record on the INDCs and the NDCs, because it's very clear that the INDCs will soon become the NDCs, and that the INDCs that were done with more than 30 agencies submitting their concurrence was based on 70% conditioned on technical and financial assistance, meaning among us, I know I'm on record, but never mind, we can say, give us all the help that we need, technical and financial assistance, to achieve our high ambition. Isn't that great? Why would you want to shortchange yourself and say, only 20%? No! Gun for 100% pa nga kung kaya eh. O 70%. It will not stymie our development, common sense, because it is conditional. So, if we're not able to meet the 70%, because the Green Climate Fund is insufficient, because the developed nations who caused all these greenhouse gas emissions in the world did not help us as much as we want, so we don't, right? So it makes good business sense, good economic sense, good environment and health sense to be able to ambition high as long as it is conditional on the technical and financial assistance that these developed nations, which caused the climate crisis, will help vulnerable nations like the Philippines. I am simplifying something very technical so that there is no misunderstanding among agencies of government and even outside of government, because this is really a whole of government, whole of society approach so that we're all on the same page, battling not each other, but battling the crisis called climate change. And we together should ask all the development partners to help our country achieve that high ambition. So I ask for everyone's patriotism to please put our ambitions high and forward and solicit all the support necessary to help our vulnerable, marginalized population. With that, I would like to recognize the civil society represented by Redentor, Renato Redentor Constantino, then perhaps a brief message from the youth of our country. Rodney, if you had prepared something, but just very brief. Yes, congratulations on the new film of your boss, VP Gore. But anyway, so Red, perhaps, Red has also been very active, and is the technical advisor in the secretariat in UNDP as well, or the CVF, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, a climate vulnerable forum. May we hear from you, please?
Thank you, Madam Senator. Before I read our short statement, I'd like to affirm what you had said just now. 100% of it is accurate. It is exactly as you had characterized the Paris Agreement, and it is also consistent directly with the two people who worked on the negotiations to contribute the Philippines' contribution to the global agreement. What Attorney Lavinia and Attorney Sering had said earlier they're not only correct, they're directly first-hand information, because we were part of the Philippine delegation that negotiated a treaty precisely to protect but also to advance the country's interest. It is exactly as Tony had said earlier, and he is absolutely correct in that regard, Madam Senator. Senator Alan had earlier alluded to the bad press that the President had received early last year. When that came out, we had taken pains right away to try to convey the fact that the President, even when he was a mayor, was always in favor of climate action. And his appointments to the cabinet bear this and show the fact that Department of Finance, NEDA, DNR were all very reflective of his championing of climate action. And we were confident, as you said, that we only need time for the government to actually convey its intention to be relevant and lead the climate negotiations. Um, the Institute for Climate and Sustainable Cities welcomes the signing of the Instrument of Accession to the Paris Agreement by President Rodrigo Duterte, and we urge the Senate to act on its solemn duty to shepherd the climate deal towards ratification. We likewise urge the Senate to ensure that the executive branch actually carries out the implementation of the climate deal once the Senate is finished with its business. It must also be wary of misinformation from fossil fuel lobby interests, which may persistently delay, if not reduce, the country's ambition to act on the climate crisis. Members of the Senate, the tasks facing the Philippine government is urgent. The nation already confronts existential threats. If global temperatures exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius and reach 2 degrees, science says we face the virtual extinction, 99% according to a UN report, of our coral reefs. Extinction events is what we face with inaction. There is not enough time in this hearing to recount threats to agriculture, other ecosystems, and the potential of the climate crisis to set back beyond reach the very development goals of government. The Senate needs to greenlight the Paris Agreement, not just for the country to survive, but also to thrive. The climate crisis challenges us to transform nothing less than the country's investment agenda. As Senator Ligarda said in her remarks this morning at the Asian Development Bank when she opened the V20 regional consultations of the V20 or Vulnerable 20 group of ministries of finance, which was chaired previously by the DOF and is still led now by in the Troika. And I quote, "Due to the increasingly dire threat posed by climate change, we need to upgrade everything: infrastructure, supply chains, urban services, logistics, food supply, and more, in order to make everything more resilient. We need to upgrade virtually all facets of our economy, which can only produce massive jobs and pump prime our economies. Climate action makes development sense," unquote. And if we may add, it makes sense including to the energy sector. In fact, instead of simply calling for an early transition to renewable energy, we've always posited and we've communicated to the Department of Energy that we can take this opportunity to advance a truly operational competition policy that actually means affordable, sustainable energy and access to the people. Members of the Senate, the ADB reported just last week that developing countries in Asia and the Pacific need infrastructure worth over $26 trillion through 2030, or $1.7 trillion per year if we factor in the costs of climate action. This is more than double the $750 billion that was estimated in 2009. And this is why the Paris Agreement is important, so that climate finance flows to the country in support of actions that our own budgets are not able to afford, and as a measure of the support that developed countries are obliged to provide. Once the country joins those who have officially embraced the Paris Agreement, we should also remind ourselves that we are not limited simply to the $100 billion that countries have agreed to put into the Green Climate Fund. Our position is that there is actually the bigger prize out there, which is the $350 trillion in the global financial system, which the government should be tapping. Our bigger challenge is not public finance, but how we can access the massive private capital out there, leverage public money for transformational investments, and ensure that we have a sustainable and resilient economy. In this respect, we hope the Senate can ensure the leadership of the DOF regarding the country's climate finance agenda, especially in the climate negotiations, because it is the expertise that is unique to the DOF that is required at the moment in the negotiations. In closing, even as we mark the sponsorship, the occasion of this hearing today on the occasion of International Women's Day, an appropriate day more than any other day in the year. As we had written in our position paper that we submitted to the Senate on February 13, 2017, the climate crisis calls for bold leadership, not cowardice. We express yet again our deep hope that the Senate will act with its conscience and muster its courage so the country can finally accede to the
but for the next generation. Thank you, Madam Chair, and God bless us all.
Well said. Thank you very much, Senator Joel. May we hear from the Climate Reality Group, Rodney Galicia, please.
As the youngest present here in this panel,
How sure are you?
in 2015, the National Youth Commission, through the program Now PH, submitted 3 million petition to the UNFCCC with the leadership of former Vice Chairperson Lucille Serene and with former Commissioner Ding Dong Dantes. At the same time, Filipinos submitted 800,000 signatures. So that's 13% of 6.2 million signatures turned over by the civil society movement, the UNFCCC. I would like to thank the Senate and all people who are behind this for securing the future of the young people, of the Filipino young people. Thank you so much for that. In behalf of the Climate Reality Project Philippines, we will continue to heighten the climate consciousness of the global community to demand justice and opportunity for people in our country and across the world. And as we continue to make climate action a reality, limiting our temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius, we're as committed as ever to bringing this movement from the negotiating halls to our communities in order to create a resilient and sustainable society for all. And in behalf of Action Klima Pilipinas, ratifying the Paris Agreement will set us to craft a well-thought of nationally determined contribution, or NDC, that embodies our vision for a prosperous and resilient people. This will guide us towards a path of sustainable transition where we can start the work now of transforming into a clean development pathway that by 2040 we can already achieve the goal of powering our economy with 100% renewable energy systems. And setting the target of 100% renewable energy by 2040 is realistic, considering the rapid pace of modern technological development. This will be a legacy of President Duterte. This will provide the basis on which subsequent administrations will follow through on what he starts now. And the negotiations in the UNFCCC have been and will be very contentious. The Philippines can provide the leadership for developing countries to make sure that the means of implementation in terms of finance, technology transfer, and capacity building are there by 2020 at the start of implementation of the Paris Agreement. In closing, we would like to honor the women behind this push for the ratification of the Paris Agreement. Senator Villar, Senator Legarda, DNR Secretary Regina Paz Lopez, and all the women behind this on this International Women's Day, especially former Secretary of the UNFCCC, Christiana Figueres, for leading the way. Thank you so much.
Thank you. May we recognize Senator Villar, please? Thank you, Rodney.
Madam Chair, I would just like to correct myself. I was just kidding when I said I already signed, but I'd sign the committee report anyway.
You were going to debate who is younger between you and Rodney.
I'm
Madam Chair,
not
he'd
gonna-
just like to correct his admission of guilt.
Okay, yes. May we recognize Senator Villar, please?
On behalf of the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources, and also the Committee on Agriculture and Food, which sector is always a victim of climate change, we give our support to this climate change agreement, and rest assured that we will try to pass a law in my community to operationalize the agreement, okay, with the help of all the people here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have a submission from former Senator Alvarez, who was also Senate Committee on Environment Chair for 10 years. It's a lengthy submission, but we would allow you a few Alvarez minutes to, yes, to say your piece, of course. Yes, Senator Sunny. But we consider this read into the record.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Kindly enter that to the record, if you please. I'll enter that into the record.
Yes.
But, Madam Chairman, let me make a very brief observation. You are able to gather a national consensus. As a matter of fact, a leadership consensus that this agreement, like many past agreements which mankind has evolved to be able to protect itself, first when it created Declaration on the Rights of Man, when the French Revolution became almost a universal acceptance for equality, fraternity, recognizing the worth and dignity of man. Later, we developed the United Nations to be able to protect us from the scourge of war. Ultimately, I feel that this institution that mankind has negotiated persistently, has been pointed out here by many of those who attended the last conferences of the 30 years, where the Philippines had made very pronounced participation. These institutions that we are creating now to address the overheating of the earth, which is the produce of our own science, the science of all humanity. 4,000 institutions are engaged in the research, headed by the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, under the auspices of the United Nations, and they have come to the irresistible conclusion, the scientific conclusion, that the earth is overheating. Our use of machines, our fuel systems is destroying the life support system that has allowed us to evolve as a civilized and intelligent species. And unless we are able to control this overheating and share the responsibility, the earth will be destroyed. Our science, before we sit down to negotiate, before the political delegates sit down to negotiate, lay down the problem, and we've examined the problem, and we have agreed with our scientists that indeed we must have this common but differentiated responsibility. The big countries, for the 200 years that they've been using huge machines and fuel systems that overheat the earth, must share a bigger burden of the responsibility. And we too must share. For we're like a globe, like a balloon. Unless the balloon is going to be whole, a punctured balloon will not float. We will sink as a community, as a species. What we are approving today is a survival participation in what the rest of humanity will be working out. These are the initial steps. 70% is a calculated reduction. Nothing is finite, but science is trying to make that calculation more and more intelligent as we move along. So that in 2030, when we shall have reduced this agreement into some kind of a binding rule, an agreement, like many rules that we have made in the United Nations, then we will gradually and effectively reduce carbon, which is the scourge to our survival, so that our industry will reduce the use of carbon. The Department of Energy will see itself with its specific function of transforming the use of our energy, not for coal, but from alternatives. Sikat ng araw, hangin, agos na walang carbon. And if we are able to do that for our community, in correspondence with the rest of the communities of the world, in 2050 our science calculates that we shall have successfully reduced the overheating of the earth by 70% degrees. 30% lang matitira sa kalahati ng century in 2050, we will be able to manage that. There had been a lot of debates, and I'm very encouraged, as you all are, to know that in this room, which shapes the global consensus, which we will share with the rest of humanity, it is clear with the leadership, it is clear with the senators, it is clear with the bureaucracy where we're heading. We must fine-tune this. We have to reduce carbon. we have to reduce our consumption, perhaps we have to reduce our population, and reduction, intelligent, systematic management of resources will spare the human species from self-destruction. And the end is not too far away. Ang sabi ng science pag hindi natin nagawa ito sa 2050, there's nothing that humanity can do to reduce the overheating. Iinit na ng init ang daigdig at mamamatay na yung ating kinakain, ang ating life support system, pagkatapos tayo na rin. Kaya, Madam Chairman, I think this wisdom shared by here is the wisdom of survival for our society and our contribution to the rest of humanity. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, former Senator Alvarez. May we also request all the agencies, if you had prepared your statements, to kindly submit soft and hard copy to the committee, because we have to prepare the committee report and prepare the sponsorship for today, and we have to adjourn today's hearing. That was the advice of the chairman as well. We thank all of you for coming here today. We know that without each and everyone's help of those present here today, this would not have become possible. But the climate journey is just starting. And we have our friends from the DOE who are very, very supportive as well, and all the other sectors, DNR, DA, all of those who will be affected adversely with the impacts of climate change. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Madam Chair, just one point before we all leave. I think the hard part was, as Attorney Professor Lavinia said, no, was getting this agreement. So the easy part will be concurring. But then we go back to another hard part, which is fulfilling our obligations and challenging ourselves to be better stewards. I remember since Mr. Galicia properly acknowledged the women behind this and International Women's Day, I remember when my sister, Senator Pia, was here, just like Senator Lauren and Senator Cynthia and the other women senators, they'd make it their personal crusade. Their advocacy will be their personal crusade. So even the segregation of waste, for example, of the Senate, kasi pinapansin namin lahat ng agencies, pero yung sarili namin, minsan nakakalimutan namin. So may I also leave that with, as a thought to all the agencies represented here today, no? Despite the fact that there's some elbow room with this agreement, let's try to assess our own departments and see how we can put together a plan and how we can be the best or the most environmentally friendly department, agency, GOCC, etc., diba? Because it's better if we are not required to do it by agreement, but because it's part of our culture, our love for God and country, that's why we're doing it. So again, congratulations, Senator Legarda. Thank you. I know this is a part of your dreams that will come true with this agreement, but I hope you will also be there for the oversight and to make sure that the agreement bears fruit. Thank you,
Thank
ladies
you.
and gentlemen.
This would not have been possible without cooperation, and the concurrence will still happen later. I hope we'll be able to secure more than 16 signatures. Thank you very much.